Hey, this is Notser, and this is the Dynamic Crosshair video. So many have been asking, what is the Dynamic Crosshair? What does it do? Well, I am happy to help. First things first, let's find the crosshairs. Go into Settings, Controls, and then you select the Crosshair button. It's very obvious once you've seen it. And under the Crosshair button, you will notice that there are two types, static and dynamic. Let's talk about static first. Static is your run-of-the-mill crosshair that doesn't change its scale whenever you try and change your zoom. That's the big issue with static. Whether you're at max zoom or 1 times, you need to understand that the scaling is not uniform. You cannot maintain a good lead pattern if you're someone who likes to change the zoom level. That's the issue with static. Now, the nice thing about static is that you can make your own crosshair, and many of those crosshairs are mod supported or fan made. You can get extra information, like how much lead I would do if he's at an angle. I personally don't use those because they clog up the screen, and most of this is presentation. I think everyone can respect that. We try and keep it as clean as possible. That's why we record live versus in the replay. The replay has artifacts and issues and stuff like that. So I can't use the special static crosshairs that have some angling, some help with the lead. You can also decide on color, black, white, whatever. And then let's go into dynamic. Under dynamic, there's only one crosshair. You only get one, and it's white. And I'm completely fine with that. It's clean. One of the reasons why I wanted to switch over and try dynamic is that it holds a very clean line all the time. It's very white, and there's no issue. The static near the edge of the screen would sort of fade out because they have this weird binocular effect. You can sort of see it, just barely. It would get hazy. I didn't really like that. So we've selected the dynamic crosshair. What else do we do? Well, make sure that you have alternative battle interface checked on, or you are willing to press Alt. It gives you basically necessary information to succeed. I don't know why this isn't on by default, because I personally feel like you're at a disadvantage without it on. So now that we turned it on, let's get in the game. We are in the game, of course. You can see it. And you notice that there's a time to target right next to my crosshair. What is that? Well, the time to target is how long the shell, and I pull a Notser. Really sorry. Really sorry. Okay, this is really embarrassing. I'm trying to teach you something. And, one thing that we don't need to learn anymore is how to run into islands. I get it. Okay, let's get back to it. So, the time to target is how long the shell's going to take to reach the target. Pretty straightforward, right? Same with the distance to target. However, the distance isn't really that big a deal. It's only really relevant if you're aware of the max range and you're coming up right on it really quickly and you can't really look at the minimap. The minimap has basically given you extra information that you didn't normally have, and of course I appreciate that. So now we see the time to target. What does the dynamic do? Well, the dynamic is 1 times the time to target scaled for 30 knots. So what that means is if the target, like a German cruiser, is moving at full speed or near full speed, they're going to hit 30 knots, probably a little bit more. And if they were going horizontal, across the screen, left to right, right to left, and they were in parallel with the horizontal line, you could use the vertical tick marks, about 7, give or take, and you should be able to hit that target relatively simply. It's not quite that straightforward because a lot of cruisers are faster. That Cleveland, for instance, was coming towards me, so if a target is coming towards you or moving away at an angle, that means they're not going their full potential across the screen. You cannot use a normal scale that you would normally apply. If Poimane tried to take a shot at me, how dare you, Poimane? And the idea is pretty simple. If a Cleveland commits to a broadside, I can use basically 1-to-1, and wherever number 5, the vertical tick mark, ends up being, that is roughly where I should hit his ship. Now, I led a little bit more, with the understanding he's going faster than 30 knots. Just a little bit more. Not too much, but just a little bit more. And the reason I like Dynamic also is the scale is closer to most of the ships, especially mid to high tier. There's not a lot of 20-knot ships at tier 8, 9, and 10. They're mostly at least 30 knots. So it's really helpful to maintain a reasonable scale and work much closer within that scale. I don't need to do 2 times. I don't need to do some weird number where it's 2.5 or something crazy, because the scale maintains pretty accurately to most of the targets I'm engaging. Now, Notser, that's all well and good. It's a 30-knot ship. Anyone can aim at a 30-knot ship, even the old way. But what do I have to do for a slow US battleship, or maybe a really fast destroyer? Okay, so if it's a US battleship, and we all know they're slow as molasses, it's about 20 knots on a good day with a wind at their back, everything in their favor, right? It's really pathetic. You want to try and lead about 70% of what you would normally lead. So if it's 4 seconds to the target, then I'm looking at 3 seconds to the target. And it all depends on their speed. You need to be able to gauge the speed of your target. You can't just take these open ideas about, okay, well, his top speed's 20 knots. He's always 20 knots. No, no, no. If he's coming in or going out of a turn, he is going to be cutting some speed off of his ship. It's within nature, physics. It's pretty simple, right? If you turn a large vessel one way, you're going to have to cut some speed in order for that vessel to take the turn safely and effectively. It's just the way it goes, right? I can't change it. That's just what the game does. And you can use that to your advantage. There are a lot of times where I have to engage an enemy destroyer, and he's coming out of a turn, and it's a fixed turn because obviously he's near max rudder. He cannot tell it to not be max rudder immediately. It takes time for it to go back to center. And in doing so, he has a fixed turn radius that I can use to my advantage. And I think the best way to aim at a destroyer, just in general, is off of feel. I know people don't want to hear that. How dare you? But a destroyer is it's an art form. You need to read the destroyer. Is he predicting your shot? Is he doing a pattern before the shot is even in the air? It all influences how you engage the target. If he's doing a pattern before you fire, then you need to use that pattern to his disadvantage. AKA, whenever he's at his most vulnerable, you want your shell to reach him. He might be doing zigzags. Well, at some point he's going to turn right back. And when he's turning right back, the rudder is spending precious seconds to go all the way to the other side so he can double back, right? That is the key point. You want your shells to hit him right as his rudder is turning back and forth. He's not really reacting at that point. It's really, really effective. And I like Dynamic because it gets rid of a lot of the vertical tick marks. It looks very clean, right? The vertical tick marks were basically useless for a destroyer, but now that I have a couple, it might be 2, 3, 4 vertical tick marks for the length of the ship. I can talk about the bow, the engine compartment, the stern. It's much easier to use the vertical tick marks to target a specific point on the ship. I really do like that, and it just fits more. It's a cleaner look to me. There might be a better static crosshair that works for you. That's fine. Now this target, obviously it's very easy when he's stationary. I notice that he's in reverse, so I aim behind him, and it should basically be 1-to-1, which it is. And yes, that wasn't hard. That didn't really show off any skill in aiming, but I just thought it looked good. And obviously looks are the most important. So, Kongo, that's a 30-knot battleship. The North Carolina, the Iowa is actually faster. The Montana, all 30 knots. The Yamato, 27. The Isamo 26, 27, I think. All the German battleships past like tier 6, they're 30 knots, so it's really helpful to use a 30 knot scale. If they're coming out of turn, they're going to be slower. If they are going straight ahead, they'll probably be faster. They might predict that you're firing on them, then you need to adjust your shot. You elevate, you depress, based on the target moving away, moving towards you. And if the target has changed their speed, which is a little bit more subtle, but if you notice, the engine will be puffing out more or less smoke depending on what speed they have selected. Now we're going to engage the enemy Gnevny, and you notice I basically use the entire screen. He's about 5 seconds away, and we let him too much. It's much easier for a destroyer to react to you, especially at 11 kilometers. Don't feel bad if you can't hit him. Don't be angry. The scale doesn't work. They have so much input in their speed that it's almost impossible to rely on the scale alone. The enemy Kongo is coming around the island, and I do about 2 seconds, 1 second lead, maybe a little bit too much, honestly. He wasn't quite up to a half speed, he was probably a fourth speed. And that gets into another part of it. It's a lot easier to look at a 30-knot ship and say he's going half speed, therefore I just need to half the time that I lead the target. So if he's 4 or 5 seconds out, we only use 2 or 3 vertical tick marks, and most of the enemies are going to be using this scale. They're much closer to 30 knots than they are to 20. So there's going to be more times where you should honestly accidentally hit the target because you're so used to 30 knots that your scaling, when in doubt, should be closer to that target. And you notice he's about 3 seconds out. The aim point was roughly, actually he's about 4 seconds out. It's about the front of the bow. And when it actually reaches the target, it's about 6, 7, 8. It all depends on the angle, the speed, how much you lead. It's really important, and it all impacts it. Either you draw it in or you draw it away. If it's a battleship, you can feel confident that you're probably going to hit them, especially a long battleship. You don't really need to be as precise as you would like when in a critical moment, right? I know everyone, we're going to get citadels every single shot, but it's nice to know, even if I miss terribly, I'm probably going to hit it because it's a battleship. Now the New York, he is a slower battleship, and we do a lead of about 4, and we didn't actually elevate the gun. He is moving away. My elevation was assuming he would not try to move away, and I tried to compensate. I didn't compensate enough. The mini-map is a huge aspect to aiming and predicting where the player is going, where the player was from. It is very, very important, honestly. It really does inform you the gun depression, specifically to the target. Sometimes, I don't know if I'm weird like this. I'll see a destroyer, and I won't know if that destroyer is moving away or moving towards me. It looks too similar, right? So I use the minimap to confirm that. The New York is moving away. I give about 1, 2 horizontal tick mark leads that you can see sort of midway along the left side of the screen. And it works out pretty well on the New York. There's not really a good scale for that. It's all about feel. Remember, all of this is using ovals. Ovals. Picture an oval around your target. When in doubt, run around the target. Make sure that he's moving towards your aim point, and it should really pay off. So yeah, that's the Dynamic Crosshair. I can't really say anything else. It scales in and out. You can use your zoom. It should maintain the same lead. It's pretty rare that you would ever need something like 60 tick marks, but it's there for you if you want. I felt like the New Mexico was moving towards me. We drew it in. We're going about 3.5 tick marks. I'm aiming either for the engine or underneath the main battery. That's where you should aim all of your big caliber guns. If you're firing HE, you want to look for the widest part of the ship. That is a tell that the ship can still take extra damage there. You notice the stern of the New Mexico is pretty white. If I was firing HE, I would probably do more damage on the stern than the burned, the blackened part of the ship. But that's just about how HE works. There's just a percentage of damage that each section of the ship can take, and then it will take minimal damage until it's dead. That's how they work. So I hope this answered many of your questions for how I use the Dynamic Crosshair. If a question was unanswered, go ahead and ask it in the comments. There's also a couple videos of me using it. The Großer Kurfürst. We also have the Kaiser and a lot of the broadcasts from twitch.tv/Notser. I'm using the Dynamic Crosshair. I think I'm one of the few who uses a live recording so you can see what I'm keying off of when I'm using the Dynamic Crosshair. I hope you have a fantastic day, and I'll catch you next time.